On the measurement side, I don't think AI has done much yet in terms of, improving the effectiveness or the efficacy of the measurement itself. And the reason is most of the AI stuff, like if you think about what LLMs are, they are word prediction machines, right? That's their core sort of skill sets. They're really good at sort of writing code, they're really good at writing prose, but they're not necessarily good at writing math. And math is not just a word prediction machine. It's more complicated than that. And so the fundamental sort of nature of AI isn't sort of conducive to improving the accuracy or the confidence in your mathematical models, which are incrementality testing and MMM.
Pranav Piyush is the CEO and co-founder of Paramark. He's a computer science major, or was, who spent his career at PayPal, Dropbox, Magento, and Build.com doing strategy, product, and growth before realizing that everything he was doing was actually marketing. He founded Paramark 3 years ago after getting tired of buying MarTech that wasn't good enough. Pranav, welcome into Inside the Blurb. How's it going?
Thanks for having me, Sean. I'm very excited. It's going great. It's a Friday here on my end. Well, I guess on your end as well. Friday morning. And I'm excited to get into all of it with you.
Excellent. How was that intro accurate? Did I capture enough background?
You did a great job.
I want people to understand where you're coming from because I think your perspective is important. But before we jump in, let me read Paramark's blurb as it appears on Blurbs because I think it's a good place to start. It says Paramark lets marketers cut through the clutter by providing tools for incrementality testing and marketing mix modeling, all under one roof. It offers practical solutions to measure real marketing impact and adjust strategies on the fly, helping users make informed investment decisions with its analytics and growth advisory services. Now, I want to dig into something there that I think is the differentiator, because for the most part, that could have been any ad measurement solution. At least that's what they would say, right? But you finish with growth advisory services. So that seems to be the differentiator when I read all the blurbs on trustblurbs.com. So let's just start there, and then we'll go back to your backgrounds. I think that's really important to set the table. But hit on that, like what is growth advisory services, and how is it different than what other providers offer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll give you an example of a real conversation that I had with a prospect just a few weeks ago that'll illustrate why this is very important. And this prospect, and I should just say like a friend now, they said that, hey, incrementality testing and scaling are at odds with each other. There's a perception within his organization that these two things are at odds. And I was like, hey, can we chat live about this? This was like on a Slack conversation, right? So like we jump into this conversation and I'm like, tell me more about what's happening. Well, he says, a holdout test means that I'm leaving money on the table and there's opportunity cost, but we're in a go environment. This is like a hot AI company. They're growing really fast and we don't want to leave any money on the table. We in fact want to invest more. We don't want to do holdouts. And in the next 5 minutes, and I went on to describe how incrementality testing is not just about holdouts. That is one very, very small part of what incrementality testing is. And so the reason I bring this story up to explain this growth advisory services, this is the type of conversation that our team is having with customers all the time about what is the real growth driver that you have to go and test in the market. And people have different levels of expertise on what it means to do incrementality testing, what it means to do MMM, what it means to do scenario planning and forecasting. And this is not a well-established, discipline in the marketing world. Even within the best companies out there, the ones with the biggest budgets. And so there's this misperception that you can just provide like, hey, our model is the best. Our incrementality testing platform and dashboards are slick. That is like 20% of the problem. The 80% of the problem is the ongoing engagement, education, change management, process management, and critical thinking that's going to get you to your growth goals within your CAC efficiency guardrails. And so growth advisory is probably the biggest lever through which you can achieve that. If you're just a dashboard company, I don't think it's going to be very good for you in the long term.
100%. I mean, the reality is technology, especially platforms, can't solve everyone's problem, right? It has to give you enough information so that you can look at the data and make smart decisions. You said something that really stood out to me, and I hear it all the time, but it was the way you positioned it. The word invest. The client that you were speaking about said he wanted to invest more, he wasn't necessarily wanting to test more, which I think the word invest is like one of those words in our industry we just throw around, like, which equals spending, right? But if we really think about the word, we invest to get a return. You can go out and spend all the money you want on advertising, right? But if you're investing, you've got to understand what's working so that you know when to make those changes. If you're buying stocks, right, you buy and sell. If you're investing, you optimize, right?
100%. I'm maniacal about using that word everywhere in our marketing copy. When I talk to customers, I never use the word spend. And it's one of those like brand principles for Paramark. It's not about spending. It's not about better spending, optimize your spending. No, it's all about investments. This is a capital allocation game.
Yep, I can go out and spend all day long, but if I'm not investing, I'm not going to get an ROI. Let's step back, because when I read your intro there, computer science major, you worked at some interesting companies. Like Bill.com and Magento and Dropbox, all a little bit different, but tech companies. How did those experiences lead you to start a measurement solutions company?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Tech is an interesting sort of space and domain, and I love all my friends in tech, but I'll be honest, most tech companies are still learning how to do marketing. And marketing is a second-class citizen in these organizations. And so when I entered the workforce and I started sort of, working on things within these companies, my focus was a lot about growth, right? That word used to get thrown around quite a bit. And the whole premise of growth was, you have a little bit of marketing, you have a little bit of product, you have a little bit of engineering, you have a little bit of analytics kind of thrown together to form a growth team, because marketing alone wasn't sort of sufficient to achieve what we wanted to achieve. So I started as a growth practitioner because I brought these different sort of skill sets to the table. And the more I did it, lots of A/B testing and growth experimentation and pricing experimentation at these tech companies eventually led me to sort of dig deeper and understand that all of that stuff was really just marketing. We were just rebranding the marketing function to the expectations of a tech company. And when I took a step back and, in 2022, I was thinking about where do I want to invest my time for the next 10 or 20 years, I realized that marketing was highly misunderstood, under-leveraged, under-resourced, understaffed, like all of the unders. Mm-hmm. And knowing how much opportunity there was, I wanted to do something about it. And by then I had become a full-blown marketer, right? I had a marketing title. I had, a team of 30 marketers working with me. And so I wanted to give back, and I wanted to do something for the marketing function and for CMOs and VPs of marketing, who were all brilliant people around me, but they were always struggling to have reasonable conversations with the rest of the C-suite. And that kind of got me excited. And then when I went out and outside of the tech bubble, I went and out, talked to people in e-com and consumer and mobile gaming. And I realized all of them are feeling the same pressures. And so it wasn't just isolated to tech, it's pretty much everywhere. And that's how that happened. And then, I realized there's so many, what's the right sort of framing of this? There's so much mythicism about what is marketing, and everything from what is brand and what is performance marketing and what is top of funnel and bottom of funnel, what is above the line, below the line. We've invented all these different ways of talking about marketing that it actually creates more noise and confusion. And honestly, applying an engineer's mind and a computer scientist's mind to that problem and really boiling it down to the basics, that was very exciting for me. And so that's what kind of led us to start the company.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think that we do throw the word marketing around a lot. And it's sort of like an all-encompassing word. And we don't stop and think common sense sometimes. We're so focused on all these words and departments. I read a blog post that you wrote maybe a month or two ago about if you advertise, you're D2C brands, right? And you're advertising on all these different channels and you're looking at the data, but the data is not telling the story. I'm going to do a bad job of explaining that blog post, but if you could explain what you were trying to communicate there, because I think it's important for marketers to understand, you can't make decisions in a vacuum, right? You have to understand the big picture. Think about your own behavior. That's what I was thinking about when you were in that blog post.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how I shop. So I'll let you explain that.
I mean, I'll give you my own personal example, right? So I was a very loyal Uniqlo customer for a decade. Okay. And 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know, just fell out of love with that brand. I still love the brand actually, but I fell out of love for just the durability of the garments that I was buying from there. And so for the first time in a decade, I became sort of open to exploring other brands. And guess what? No other brand had really left a mark on my mind about, oh, this could be my go-to brand for basics. And now I went on a 2-year-long journey of figuring out what it is that I'm going to attach myself to for the rest of, for the next decade. And this is an interesting point because for 10 years, I was out of market and then immediately I was in market. And there was no other brand other than Uniqlo that had really planted a deep, deep sort of impression on me of like, this could be my go-to brand. And I will tell you, even right now, the only brand that has actually been able to like impress upon me that, okay, this is something that I can adopt is True Classics. This is like an online D2C, well, I guess they've started retail now, basics brand. And I ordered a bunch of stuff and now I've grown loyal to it for a certain type of apparel. Now, I had seen True Classic ads for probably 2 or 3 years before I even decided to buy from True Classic for the first time. I saw their viral YouTube ads. I saw their, Instagram ads. I saw them walking by in the San Jose Mall. There's multiple things that happened before I ever bought from them. And for a long period, I noticed those ads and I was like, that's funny, ha ha ha, but never actually took action. And then when I entered the market, I took action. So the point here is their value prop and their patience with me of like, we're going to keep marketing to you even though you have not bought yet. And we're not thinking about this as just short-term returns. And we're playing the long game. That is what good marketing is. This is, if you think about it, like, I never like clicked on an ad and then bought right then and there. There was a ton of research that happened in that 2-year-long process. I went to the website and mobile sucks. I don't like buying stuff on my mobile phone because, who's buying clothes on mobile? Like, it doesn't work for me. Maybe it works for other people. So it's like, I went to Amazon, like Amazon basics, right? So there's all this stuff that happens that is not like click, 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 one clean online buyer journey leading to a conversion. That's just not how life works. And the more marketers kind of fully understand and appreciate that, the better their decision-making is going to be. So take your own personal purchase, right? And then figure out how and why that happened, but put a critical lens on it. And most people actually are horrible at remembering why they buy what they buy. This is the other thing.
Yeah, you're spot on. And it's not that, it's funny because we hear, well, MTA doesn't work anymore, so now we have to think differently. Well, did MTA ever actually work? It was easy to use, but like you just said it, you've never clicked on an ad and bought something the first time you saw the ad, right? So I don't know anyone that has. Like you don't go, ad, click, buy. Like maybe on Facebook, because it's a little bit different, right? Because it's a bigger ad and you click on it, and there's a video and there's descriptions. But even then, it isn't click and buy. There's some pages in between.
I'll give you another brilliant example. This happened to me like a month ago. I was in market for some skincare products, okay? And there was some like medical sort of things that I had to pay attention to. And so I did my research on Gemini. So I did all of my research and it gave me these 3 options. Out of those 3 options, one option was CeraVe. Okay. And I had become a fan of the CeraVe brand, having never bought anything from CeraVe up until then because I didn't need it. And the reason I had become a fan of the brand, their Super Bowl ad from like 2 years ago when Michael Cera did the whole okay, you have to watch this ad. So Michael Cera, the comedic actor, there was a whole sort of guerrilla campaign where he was going into physical stores and then taking CeraVe off of the shelf, signing it and putting it back on, and they captured it on video. And then they had a Super Bowl reveal that he was a brand ambassador for CeraVe. Brilliant campaign. Again, 2 years in the making, and then I never bought anything. And then when I actually needed to buy something that was top of mind, the other 2 brands didn't speak to me. I was like, might as well go with CeraVe. So now, if you're the growth marketing manager at CeraVe, you're like, oh, Gemini got me that click, right? Because I clicked through from there to Amazon to buy. But that wasn't it at all.
All right.
That wasn't it at all. You had to have both. You had to have the brand impression and then the availability at the point of purchase. And people just think about MTA because that's the easy thing. Here's the point of purchase. But they forget about all the other ways in which brand building is done.
Yeah, and it's a vicious cycle, right? Because then you're optimizing for click, and then your sales dip because you're not optimizing to the right thing. And let's go into that a little bit deeper. Like if you were talking to the CMO at CeraVe, how would you? And you were pitching him, services. How would you tell him Paramark could help him understand what you just described, right? Because he's out there spending money on digital and TV and print. or out of home, whatever he's doing, he probably never gave thought to the idea that you came from a from a Google Gemini search and bought something that really dated back 2 years to a Super Bowl ad. Like, how does a brand make that connection?
Yeah, the first thing you have to do is like the anecdote that I gave to describe this was one observation, right, of Pranav making a purchase. There are thousands, tens of thousands of those decisions being made by consumers any given day. So the first thing you have to realize is that every one of those decisions is unique and different. And some people are indeed in market when that Super Bowl ad played, and some people are not, like me. So this idea that you have to have perfect sort of linear journeys is not all that sort of correct. But the way that I would explain this to a CMO, he or she, who's making these investments, is when you made that Super Bowl investment and all of the surrounding campaigns in that time period in Q1 of 2024 or 2025, whenever that aired, did you see a lift in sales overall across all of your channels during that time period? And so this is all about taking that investment mindset and saying, when I make an investment, do I see a corresponding increase in my sales? When I pull back, let's say next year I didn't do the Super Bowl ad, did I see a more depressed volume of sales? And so you're trying to connect the dots between different levels of investment. And Super Bowl is a very, very hard thing to measure for that reason, because you're just going national and it's hard to like detect noise from signal. But that's how I would have that conversation, that it's not about trying to isolate the effect of one particular buyer journey. You're trying to isolate the effect of one particular sort of investment strategy. And there are very advanced mathematical ways of determining this. These days, we call them ML and AI, but they've existed for a long, long time. And the basics of, statistics and econometrics and data science, they've evolved in that sort of, way, are there to help you. So it's not at all hard. You just have to be wanting to know the truth.
There's always going to be outliers, so you got to measure where the majority of the activity is coming from. For the record, the reason I probably don't remember that commercial or any commercial from that Super Bowl was that I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I was a little bit out of my mind that day. So it really depended on what time of the game it was shown. I was either stressed out or I was ecstatic and I was already celebrating. So it was a different kind of experience. Right? Go Birds. So I want to dive into the AI piece, because you've mentioned it a couple of times and I know it's a hot topic. How is AI changing measurement? So when you think about those years that you spent at those other companies like Bill.com and the others, AI wasn't as prevalent. And machine learning was, for sure. And I know AI is sort of an evolution of machine learning, but how is AI, as we think about it today, changing the ad measurement world?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a couple of ways to tackle this. One is, how is it changing consumer behavior? Right? So this is more about like the usage of AI and decision-making from a consumer side. And then there's like, is AI doing anything for the measurement on the brand side? On the consumer side, you go and read any marketing sort of research report right now, every CMO is freaking out about AI search, AI visibility, blah, blah, blah. And the thing that I tell marketers is, if you were highly dependent on search, then you have a real problem. Because yes, search has gotten upended and it's going to take a while before Google sort of rolls out AI overviews to everything. And then I think it'll settle back down. But if you're highly dependent on search, then yes, AEO, GEO is extremely important to you because you don't have an alternative. Mature brands have actually not been that reliant on search at all. They have invested in social, TV, online video, podcast, radio, direct mail, what have you. And so for the more mature brands, consumer, behavior is not such a huge impact on their overall business, mostly because they have diversified. And like I said, they've implanted sort of brand memories in consumers' minds. So that's in my opinion, the honest, practical take. Yes, go figure out AEO, GEO, but like the grand scheme of things, it's not that much of a deal, in my honest sort of opinion. Do good marketing. If you do good marketing, everyone will want to feature you, and then you will show up in LLMs as well. On the measurement side, I don't think AI has done much yet in terms of, improving the effectiveness or the efficacy of the measurement itself. And the reason is, most of the AI stuff, like if you think about what LLMs are, they are word prediction machines, right? That's their core sort of skill set. So they're really good at sort of writing code, they're really good at writing prose, but they're not necessarily good at writing math. And math is not a just a word prediction machine. It's more complicated than that. And so the fundamental sort of nature of AI isn't sort of conducive to improving the accuracy or the confidence in your mathematical models, which are incrementality testing and MMM, right? These are mathematical sort of ways of looking at the data. But what's happening now is it will make the consumption of these models much easier. What that means is a marketer or an analyst will be able to ask natural language questions to your MMM output or to your incrementality test output or to your scenario planning output. And that will improve the usability of the underlying sort of tools and platforms like Paramark. And I'd be surprised if in the next 12 months, every incrementality platform doesn't have some type of a natural language capability on top and some type of agentic capability where you give a command and you're not waiting on human beings to, operate that. It's like a bunch of robots are doing a bunch of work behind the scenes, but they all have to be built on top of mathematical models, not language models. That's the difference. There's a nuance here. It's not just like throw AI in your pitch and then suddenly, you've got a winning solution. There's a lot to be figured out still.
Yeah, I mean that's huge, right? Because even just being able for a marketer to ask questions of the data in real time is speeding up the business, right? It allows you to stay ahead of your competition, or at some point, staying on pace with your competition. When I think about I want to see what makes Paramark interesting visually. Like I want you to pull that up and show us some of the things that you were planning on showing us. While you're doing that, when I think about the ad measurement space, so this is not going to be a surprise to anyone, so I'm not trying to catch you here. If I go to Blurbs, there's over 20 ad measurement solutions in just incrementality and MMM. Forget about the other brand surveys and audio and all of that. And I'm sure when I go to Google, I see dozens of companies that come up when I just search in MMM and incrementality. So how does a company like Paramark stand out? Like you're a marketer, right, by trade. Now you're a tech entrepreneur. How do you make sure that, from a marketing perspective, I imagine Paramark differentiates itself from all of that noise?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? And I mean, honestly, it boils down to three things. One is our ability to be disciplined with who we serve and what we do. And what I mean by this is, every vendor, if you try to be everything to everyone, you're nothing for no one, right? And so a lot of it is like choosing your identity and then mapping to that, to that consumer or that sort of business, user's identity and being very lockstep with who you are trying to solve for. That's one. And the way we do that, the way we think about sort of who our dream customer is one that has scale. They're spending, millions of dollars a month, or sometimes, more than that, tens of millions of dollars a month. So they're advanced, they're scaling, they have very high growth ambitions. They have a sophisticated channel mix, both in the marketing and the sales side. And so when I say sales side, I mean, it's not just a mom and pop D2C store spending, $1 million on Meta and calling it a day. They have D2C, they have Amazon, they have, Target and Macy's, they have retail, they have a sophisticated mix. And that makes the problem and challenge of measurement even more complicated. So that's like one piece of it. Advanced, mature brands that are looking for mature solutions. They're not just looking for pretty dashboards. That's sort of one way in which we differentiate. And that's why the whole emphasis on growth advisory. The second piece in differentiation, it boils down to transparency. Marketers have been sold a lot of marketing technology over the last 2.5 decades, including from the likes of Google and Meta. And if you think about how much trust has been broken and lost, it's because of over-promising and under-delivering. And MarTech vendors are really good at that. A lot of us come from a marketing background, and so we are really good at marketing and we say lots of right things. And the problem is, how do you manage expectations? How do you do it in a way that you're not going to underwhelm? You're not going to sort of oversell. And that comes with transparency. Here's what's possible. Here's what's not possible. And that is one way in which we differ quite a bit. We never tell customers that you can get to a double-digit decimal precision on an incrementality test result. We never say that MMM is the ground truth. It's not. MMM is not a, prediction machine. It cannot predict the future. Anybody who is talking about prediction accuracy is, I'll be honest, just lying if they understand the data science, at least like promoting a falsehood that they shouldn't. So transparency is critical, and that's sort of the second differentiator. The third is human in the loop. There's a lot of sort of new solutions that are going to come up. It's very easy to build something with Claude and Codex, and it's not that complicated to go build an incrementality testing solution. The reality is that you do need a human in the loop for everything that comes in the marketing world. There's a lot of nuance, and if you don't have that, it's going to be, again, sort of not a high trust relationship. So those are the three things that we focus on. If you're a tech business, I tell people all the time, like I got asked this question on a panel a couple of weeks ago, what is your moat? And I tell people there is no moat. The only moats that exist right now are speed of innovation and your culture. And you look at what's happening with OpenAI and Anthropic. One takes the lead, the other one takes the lead. And then the first one comes back and takes the lead again. Why is that happening? It's all about the speed of innovation. And anybody who, you can argue like, well, they both have moats. Well, maybe we'll find out. They have a first mover advantage, but I wouldn't call that a moat, right? If Thinking Machine Labs or, Sutskever's AI company start releasing better and better models, I think both OpenAI and Anthropic are going to be sort of, they're going to be put on their back foot, and they're going to have to come back and outcompete on innovation. So that's how I think about it. It's speed of innovation, it's culture, and then, our differentiation, like we already talked about.
Yeah. Let's see what it looks like, because
yeah,
I think you said some really important things there. The trust piece is really important, right? And I think buyers, they don't say this, but I think in some ways they want to be sold to. They want you to, they're listening for certain things that strike a nerve, and then they lean into you more or less if you hit it. But the reality is they have to understand the realities, right, of what's possible. And and the last thing I'll say before you dive into this is, I see it all the time. There's people out there going, look what I did in Claude Cowork or Claude Code. I built this MMM. But like, if you're not a measurement specialist, if you don't understand the intricacies of ad measurement, you have a dashboard, right? You don't know how to read the data. You don't know how to act upon the data. You need expertise to help you. It isn't just looking at numbers. Feel free to comment on that if you want, but I think I was just reiterating what you were saying, and then and then dive into what you're sharing on the screen here. And if you do me a favor, when you're showing us what's here, sort of talk through it in a way that people that are just listening in can visualize what you're showing.
Absolutely. And I don't want to make this a sales pitch. Like the point of this is just to kind of help people who have maybe never interacted with, advanced measurement and experimentation, what is on the other side of that sort of experience, right? And okay, great. So you'll notice a lot of emphasis on experimentation. You will see a lot of emphasis on velocity and confidence. And the reason those words are important is no matter how much MMM you have, I'm a strong believer that you have to take action. And taking action means constantly running experiments on top of the data that you're getting from an MMM. And the point of confidence and velocity here, it's all about the velocity and the volume of learning, right? How quickly are you learning? Are you learning faster than your competitors about your marketing mix and your consumer sort of buying behavior? And then are you increasing your confidence over time about where to invest and where not to invest? Now, the one thing I'm going to jump ahead and just like talk about sort of how this works for most brands. The number one thing that brands get wrong is their data is garbage. and everything else, that I'm going to show you won't work if your data is garbage. And what do I mean by data being garbage? Brands, like, I don't think I've met a single brand that has all their data in a single place. So that's step one, is do you even have all your sales data in a warehouse? Especially if you're multi-channel, right? Your Amazon data, your retail data, is it geotagged? And door level data, is it making it into your warehouse? And then how do you structure all your ad data? Like Meta could be 5 different buckets of investment. It's not just Meta. And so are you aligned in terms of your head of growth marketing and your agency and your channel manager on what exactly is Meta awareness and what exactly is Meta brand and Meta retargeting and so on and so forth? And so Step number one is just getting all of that data organized. And I'll kid you not, that is not a click, click, click onboard, ready to go. It takes, weeks to get all of that data cleaned up, normalized, validated. So very, very important. The second piece that I would say, what you should expect from any incrementality testing vendor is really thorough experiment designs and analyses. And what this means is, running all of your data through these machine learning models that Paramark has to identify the right geographies, the right budget, the right time frame to run an incrementality test. So the example that I'm showing you on the screen here was a TV test that we ran where you pulsed up your TV investments in a certain part of the country and you kept the rest of the country sort of business as usual, i.e., you didn't have TV investment. And then you look at what is the lift or the lack thereof, not just during the test period, but also after the test period, because there's a lagged effect, right? So the design and the analysis of these tests and doing it in a way that is going to be statistically rigorous becomes really important. So that's something that Paramark does all the time. And over time, you also then see a more sort of real-time way of looking at all of your marketing investment data and getting a sense of how much of that is driving incremental sales versus baseline sales. And incremental sales is all about sort of what can be related to your marketing investments. And baseline is, think of it as a way of describing your built up brand equity, your word of mouth, your organic demand in the market. And just like you do that at the aggregate level, you now get down to the individual channel level and start to see like how different channels and sub-channels are contributing to your business metrics, what the return on investment is. And this becomes the starting point for further experimentation. Hey, you have a channel that's $86 of CAC, and here's another channel that's $2,000 of CAC. Well, should we reallocate and run that as a test? And you rinse and repeat from there every month, every quarter, every year. And so that sort of virtuous cycle to go from an experiment to a model, to a modeled output, to then back to an experiment is the way in which we work. Now, there's a ton more in terms of we provide really sort of clear, easy to understand summaries of everything. There's understanding diminishing returns and doing scenario planning, but these are advanced concepts. The basics, you still have to get your data clean, start to get into experimentation, start to do MMM, and then over time you start to get more and more advanced with scenario planning and forecasting. All right, I said a lot of words, but reactions to that, Sean?
Yeah, no, I think the one of the first points you made is like the most important piece to all of this, which is garbage in, garbage out. We talk about this all the time on this show. I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago from a CEO and founder of a company called Adderley. And what they're doing is saying, look, you don't really even need a data warehouse because the data is stale, it's old, it's duplicated. Really, you should just be plugging directly into the source so that when you're doing these kinds of things, not just measurement, but other things as well. And very important is the measurement piece. It's real time. It's real data. It's the right data, and you're normalizing it the right way so that you're making real business decisions on real data, real complete data on all aspects of your business, not just the view that you're looking at.
I think that's right. I think the practical challenge around that sometimes is that data is not in a real-time system. So think about a retail environment, right? If you're getting a bunch of data from Walmart and Target and Macy's, you just get flat files, you get CSVs on a weekly basis. So you do have to put that into a place where it's going to become accessible and so on and so forth. There's some post-processing on the data that you have to do. So it really just depends on the nature of your business. But yes, for a simple store, right, that's running on Shopify and all your data is Shopify from a sales perspective, it makes sense to go plug directly into Shopify.
Yeah, and it was more about like big picture, like, okay, where else do you sell? What's happening where? What's selling in what region? What's not selling? Manufacturing. I mean, it pulled in everything, but the point was that you need good, clean data to make any kind of valuable business decision that's going to move the needle on your business. I think that's really helpful. I want to ask you a really unique question because we have the MarTech Matrix has two shows, and then the other show is called the human side of MarTech, and where we interview the brand side, the buyers, people that you're selling to. But you were that person before this. And one of the questions or topics we discuss on that show is, as a buyer of solutions, what is your process? How do you evaluate solutions, right? And for them, it's usually a more broad question. But for you, I want to make it more specific. If you were talking, if I became a buyer, and we're having a beer, we're talking, and you're going to give me some advice, and I'm evaluating solutions in the ad measurement space, what would you tell me? What's the lens I should be looking at this through?
I'm way too biased to answer that question in any meaningful way, Sean, right? Because everything that I'm going to say is going to be colored by the fact that I run a measurement company. But I'll give you some like thoughts from, we are a startup. We make marketing and sales, investment decisions about how we buy products for ourselves, for Paramark. So I'll give you some thoughts from like my perspective on that. I'll tell you the three things that I don't love. One, when your team doesn't respond. I had this experience where I went and filled out a form. I got an immediate response from somebody and I was like, all right, great. This is fantastic. I love it. I love how fast you moved. I really need this X, Y, and Z thing done. 1 week went by and then we were ready to like actually make the purchase. And I responded to that same thread. They still haven't responded. It's been 3 weeks.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? So first thing I tell people is if you're running any type of B2B SaaS, right? Like that thing, the speed of interaction as a buyer matters more than almost anything else. And this is like going to sound weird to you, right? Which is like, so
not at all.
If your vendor isn't responding fast during the sales process, it's going to be 10 times worse after the sales process. Mm-hmm. It's not going to get better.
100%.
So that's one. The second is transparency. And what I mean by transparency is, I don't know why, like we have conditioned the whole MarTech world to never reveal prices. It's wild to me. So as a buyer, I'm always looking for how much is this going to cost me before I have a sales conversation. And so, again, like if people are taking way too long to even sort of express what their pricing is, there's something that's broken, in my opinion, in that sort of engagement. The third is honestly, a lot of the buying decisions are getting made on, Slack communities and text and basically behind the scenes and word of mouth. And so as a buyer, I would always go and talk to like a couple of other people or try to see who else is using this platform. And that's a big part of like how decisions get made, even from my perspective. So those are some of the things that I look for, right? Speed in which the vendor is responding, how transparent are they about what they are selling, how they price it. And then the last is like, hey, can I go get a couple of good references from people in my community? Yeah, I don't know.
No, I think that it's really helpful. I know this wasn't intentional, but that's what we're trying to change in the ecosystem with Blurbs, right? Like if you're a subscribing vendor on Blurbs and a buyer is doing a search for ad measurement and attribution, and they're building their, we'll call it their watch list. Like, okay, these vendors are the ones that stand out to me based on what their Blurbs page says. If you're a subscriber, you're going to get that brief, like a mini RFI. If they submit one, you're going to get it right away, instantly. And I tell every vendor, respond immediately, like at least within 24 hours. Don't make the person wait. And if you're not a subscriber, you're going to be even more delayed because then I got to go find out who you are, get you the questions. You have to do the answers. I have to explain what Blurbs is all about. You're not going to win the business. So better to respond more quickly. And I do white glove searches for brands in my other business. I can't tell you how many times I've experienced what you described there. No one gets back to me, or I have to reach out twice, and then I have an SDR. Then I gotta justify why a salesperson should talk to me, to a 22-year-old SDR, and I'm doing work for a Fortune 500 company. It doesn't make any sense. Brands or vendors need to get better at the way that they communicate with brands, because that's where the trust and transparency really, really pays off. I want to pivot toward the end of the show here and ask you a couple of questions. When you think about the future, I know you touched on this a little bit with AI and being able to ask questions. A brand could ask questions of the data. Are there any other visions that you see where AI is really going to help move the needle on this sector, and where vendors are going to stand out, where Paramark can stand out from the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think, here's my take. I think in maybe the next 2 years, you're going to see a merging of measurement and media buying. And if you go talk to any agency owner right now, they're going to tell you that they're trying to do more and more measurement because they need to be able to prove the efficacy of how they're investing the dollars. And if you go talk to any brand, they're going to tell you like, hey, the interaction between an incrementality platform and my agency and my in-house team is extremely painful. Yes, I love what we're getting, but like it's still painful because I have to, the coordination cost, the death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so I think there is a future world where those things are going to get collapsed and you're going to have a much more streamlined way of doing media buying and your agency relationship and your incrementality all happening in one place. And I'm not, suggesting like any imminent things, but I think that is like as a former VP of marketer, I would imagine that should be a lot more streamlined, and there's no reason, no technical, practical reason why that can't be the reality. And that's a very exciting future. Yeah.
Are you leaning, just to clarify that, are you leaning into the idea that autonomous media buying based on data is a world we're going to have or see in a couple of years?
Yes. I don't like the word autonomous or self-driving. I think there's still going to be a human in the loop, right? Just like there's a human in the loop in any Claude interaction that you have. There's no self-driving in Claude. I'll just be honest. Like you're still prompting Claude to do something and then you're verifying the output. And so it's going to be similar to that, where you have a lot of automation. You have a really strong set of capabilities for media buying, for creative, for incrementality. You still have a human in the loop. And but the thing that you're going to eliminate is the umpteen number of calls to get everybody aligned on what is the next test we're going to run. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And then how are we going to set up this test? And then what does the test results say? And then, did we get the creative in time? Do we have the creative ops and the creative chops to be able to run this test? All of that of coordination is going to go away.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, you still have to have people that understand measurement because AI can make mistakes. You got to know your business. There are always going to be influences that the data isn't going to show, like maybe you have inventory issues or shipping issues or whatever. You have to be able to think about these things. One last question. If you could go back to your early self in your career, post-college, your first job, what would you tell yourself? Or what is it that you wish you knew then that you know now?
Ooh, a couple of things. I think I would spend a lot more time early in my career studying human behavior. I only really started to pay attention to that in a conscious way in my late 20s and early 30s. And I think understanding human behavior and psychology and decision making and the science behind all of that in college would have been quite enlightening. It helps you in every part of the way, right? Sales, marketing, building product, investor relationships, your personal relationships, right? All of those things. And we all don't spend time thinking about that. So that's one that I would invest a lot of time and energy on.
Excellent. That's a great one. I wish I had done the same thing. This has been fantastic. Enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully we can have you back on soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is great. And very excited about what you all have built with Blurbs. And good job.
Thanks, man. Have a great weekend.
You too.
That's it for today's episode of the MarTech Matrix, a Blurbs production. To see what's coming up next, visit themartechmatrix.com. And if you're looking for your next MarTech solution, start your search at trustblurbs.com, where marketers discover vendors faster.